So I'm joined by Amber Jean. Thank you so much, Amber Jean, for joining me and spending the day with me. Like, this has been an amazing day. Like, started off this morning at RX Coffee in Livingston, and then meeting Ray here, and then going up to your guys' place and getting to see your view from top of the world and the studio. And I just appreciate you taking this time, because I know you guys are super busy. So thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for coming up and putting yourself into a little slice of our world and doing what you do.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. It wouldn't be possible without and people like you. So I really appreciate it and sharing the stories and hopefully inspiring folks. And speaking of that, I'd like to run through the bio real quick. So Amber Jean, declared one of America's woodworking greats. Amber Jean was asked by the Prime Minister of Bhutan to carve in the retreat palace for their king. Her bronzes are cast from carved wood, such as the life-size bison sculpture at the Bozeman International Airport and the Fleischer Museum?
Oh, Fleischer.
Fleischer Museum collections. Amber Jean was voted top 25 out of 1,500 artists from 53 countries at Art Prize. She's one of 10 women inducted into the Stetson Craftsman Alliance. Her work is featured on the wood sculpting TV series produced by DIY and the Auction Network Pure Auction Show. Her palm-sized animal sculptures cast in solid bronze are collected worldwide, and my wife is a proud owner of one of those. Which is super special. Like, it really warmed our house up, and it's wild because, like I said, palm size. So the owl that you created and we bought from you, it's amazing. It's small piece, but it really adds and to our home.
Mm-hmm.
So you're amazing. Like I said, I appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So if you want to start kind of like your career, I mean, like, getting to like know you more today has been like amazing and really special. So I don't know if you want to like kick off just like how you got started. I mean, like, I guess what got left out of that is that you were the first female wilderness ranger in the wilderness.
The Taylor Hillgard Wilderness.
Yeah, Taylor Hillgard Wilderness. So I mean, there's a ton that I missed in that little bio. So
yeah,
wherever you want to kind of kick off and explain like kind of how you ended up here.
Well, that bio is like, it's like a little cookie from the business part of, or the how I show up in the world as an artist, or that kind of thing, those kind of accolades. But of course, there's so much behind all of that, and just even the path of pursuing art and pursuing an education and everything from, I guess I'm not sure where to start. I was born in Wyoming. We can always start where I was actually born in Wyoming in a little tiny town called Gillette, and we lived in a trailer park. Yeah. And my family moved to Montana before I started kindergarten. So I consider myself a Montanan and a Westerner, just by my roots.
Yeah, definitely.
And I was lucky to grow up here. I grew up in the town of Bozeman, which is one of the bigger towns in Montana. And I thought I was kind of like a city girl, because both of my parents are from small towns in Nebraska.
Oh.
And my town growing up, it's a university town, but as a kid growing up in the town, there was a department store on Main Street that had an escalator.
Oh.
One of those moving stairs.
Yeah, kind of big
so
deal.
That seemed like a big deal, because our family trips consisted of going back to Nebraska in the summertime to see the grandparents and family. And
cornfields or?
Corn and wheat.
Corn and wheat, yeah. And
wheat is from some early memories, and it's a recurring theme in a lot of my work from those days. Yeah. So that was the beginning, and I knew at a pretty young age that I wanted to be an artist. I mean, I went through some of the other things that I thought I wanted to be, just as you're growing up and interested in so many things, and writing, and I loved reading. So, and I do love to write, and I imagine I will. So one of the things would be to write and illustrate like children's books and stuff. So I did that as a kid. I would write, illustrate books and
that's cool.
Make things. And I just knew.
Yeah, you had the creative, whatever bug or whatever you had in you, like to create, right? The drive, the passion, I guess, right?
Yeah, I just had that urge. I think I could call it a passion. It wasn't something. I wasn't in a family that nurtured those things. I wasn't in a family that collected art or even valued it really. And so I guess you could say as a passion, but as a kid, kids are so passionate. I guess it was a passion. It felt like a calling to me, and it's something that I felt I was here to do. I don't know. Yeah. I thought I was special.
Well, you are
when I was a kid. I know,
special,
it's funny, but when I was a little girl, Amber wasn't a common name, and people would just say, "Oh, what a beautiful name. Yeah. Where did you get that name?" And so I felt like right off, that was kind of, I don't know how much a name makes who you are, but just that feeling, because my family didn't make me feel that way. Yeah. But people's reaction, even then, like I even made up a story that had to do with wheat for my name, because it seemed like it needed a story.
Yeah.
Which if I tell you, you're going to think I make up all my stories, and I don't. But and it came from the Amber Ways of Grain,
That's
the song.
My brain went instantly when you were talking about making up a song. I was like, oh, I wonder if that's...
Yeah, I was like in grade school, and it was like Amber Ways of Grain. I'm like, oh, that's so beautiful. And I love the fact that it was a color. Yeah. And so people would ask me all the time, why did you get that name? That kind of thing. Yeah. And so I said that.
It is a great name.
My grandfather was in the wheat field, because he had wheat fields, big wheat fields, and he was in the wheat field when he was somebody. I envisioned somebody coming out and telling him I was born, and there he was standing in the wheat field, and the wheat was like blowing in the wind, and it was like this light on the wheat, and it was like this thing, which is hilarious because I was one of 53 grandchildren for my grandfather.
Holy cow!
I'm sure nobody went running anywhere to tell him I was born. It was probably just like mentioned over dinner, when he came in from the fields, it's like, oh yeah. And
another one.
One of your 8 daughters had a kid, her second, that kind of thing. Yeah. Anyway, it's pretty funny.
That is funny. No, I think it's cool to like kind of picture something like that though, because we're all important in our own ways,
Yeah. So. And imagination's important too, and it's good. And connection. I think I was looking for connection. And when I think about that today, like, it could even be those early seeds of me wanting this connection to earth and nature and things that grew. And, we grew up in the quote unquote city of Bozeman.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is like even,
we had a really nicely pruned lawn, which my father took a lot of pride in, and pussy willow trees that I got some branches from the neighbor when he trimmed his tree, and I wrapped them together when we planted them so that tree grew. I appreciated those things. So I'm not. I just think there was always for me this really strong draw to nature and connection in nature.
Absolutely, and like where my brain with kind of having the story behind your name is very Native American, tribal to our ancestors, our ancestors of like you got named something that had to do with what you were or are or going to be, So like I think it's important.
Origin stories, right? Story. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've heard this a lot lately because I've had some archaeologists and some historians on, like, and just podcasts and other things I've listened to about knowing where you are so you know where you're going, or know where you've been, like as a people, as generations or whatever, your family and even yourself, recognizing where you've been, where you've come from, because you don't see growth unless you look back, True. Like even this, like it kind of works out good because I was going to mention this is like, when I first got this going, I knew right away I wanted you to have you on and Raymond, and I was like, but I knew right away that I was going to be really bad at this. So I was like, I know I got to have Amber on, and I don't know when, and I got to make sure it's good. I want to be good because I want to be able to be a good host and have a good atmosphere so that you want to share and inspire other folks. Yeah.
So that's sweet. That's cool.
I may have rushed it, but we're here.
No, you did not at all.
Yeah.
And you're, well, I don't know if people know that Raymond's my husband. Maybe you mentioned that already, but
I think we talked about you a little bit on the podcast, but yeah,
Oh,
that probably
okay.
should say, yeah. Who was
Yeah.
on my podcast before, Raymond and Sodagi.
Yeah.
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 And your name, Amberjean and Sodagi, like, it just has a great ring to it. Like, I'd never said it full or heard it said full until Raymond said it the other day when we were on the phone. I was like, wow, that was a really nice ring to it, you know?
I like it too.
Yeah, it's really,
like
it just
it too.
fits, you know? And just, it's, yeah. I think if you look at life in a positive way and, like, are kind of like, I don't know, more happy about things. Like when you hear like the stuff like that, you're like, wow, that works. But if you're not looking out like an optimistic person, you'd probably just like, oh, it's a name, you know? But like to me, I was like, wow, that sounds really nice. That's perfect, you know?
Yeah, well, name, like I was just saying, is so important, and it's a very fascinating thing to me. And my mother's name was Betty, and like I mentioned, she had 7 sisters and 4 brothers. And I found out later, well, I had an Aunt Liz, whose name was Elizabeth, which I didn't know when I was really young, but Betty is a nickname for Elizabeth. So my mother didn't really have her own name in a way, because she already had a sister named Elizabeth. So she was Betty, and there's not like, so they called her Bets. That was like the nickname for Bets. But one of her older sisters told me once when I was visiting that there was discussion, or she was supposed to be named Josephine, or my Aunt Jeanette, who was the oldest daughter, thought she should be named Josephine. And I remember thinking, I wonder who my mother would have been had she been named Josephine.
Yeah.
I think it would have changed her. I think she would have been a different person. I really do. And little Joe, of course, the novel and everything, like little Joe, like Joey, like, I don't know, it's Josephina, Fina, like all the things she could have been. But I feel like my mother was a beautiful person, but also quite timid and always sort of second. Like Josephine might have made her feel different.
Yeah.
And I know Amber made me feel special because there weren't any Ambers around then. Or maybe I'm just reading too much into it, but I think it's interesting. And I thought a lot about it when I married Raymond, because I had never been married, and we met later in my life. And I had been calling myself simply Amber Jean. I hadn't been using my birth last name for a long time. And I liked Amber Jean. I was comfortable, so I was using Jean almost like a last name.
Yeah.
But then I thought about it, and he was like, it's totally up to you. And I loved the Ann Sodagi, and I loved what it meant to me and how it felt to me to be Mrs. Ann Sodagi. And I have no judgment about what people choose, but it can be kind of confusing with the names these days. And,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'm with you. And like kind of like if it fits, like, and you have a good feeling about it, like yours, know, definitely go with it. Yeah. It is, and then, then it gets more confusing too when, like, if you were a doctor, and you were doctor whatever before you became Sodagi, it's like, oh man, because all your paperwork and stuff has to change over to Dr. Sodagi from what it was, and so it can be kind of a little bit of entanglement and a little bit of a headache. I mean, you could do it, but
right. Yeah. Well, when I was a college student, I remember having a discussion with some girlfriends about this thing, because they were like, Amber, because they one of them, who was a real strong feminist, was like all against taking someone's last name when they got married. And none of us were getting married at the time. We were just having this discussion. She was very adamant. And I was like, well, I don't see anything wrong with it. Like, it's okay for me. I don't feel like I'm losing anything. But that was me. And I wasn't feeling judgy about that. But and I said, but then what happens to the kid? Because, kids have the hyphenated names, and then who's the hyphen after that? I'm like, well, I'm just going to let my kid choose. And I went, that's cool, but that could be difficult.
Yeah.
It could be challenging. Like the family who says, who's edging, or the grandpa who's kind of like nudging the kids towards that name, or that's a lot of responsibility. And I felt like I knew who I was. And she said, Amber, of all of us at this table, you should care the most, because if you're going to be an artist, you're not going to want to change your name if you're known as somebody before, because you have professionally,
Yeah.
And that was part of what had me decide to drop my last name and just be Amber Jean. But I was using Jean then as a last name.
Yeah.
And so that I could always be Amber Jean, but I didn't drop it officially. I still had Reinhard in the backgrounds of things, but Reinhard just never fit. And there was some other things that I felt about it. And so it's like Amber Jean was on everything, and it just worked that way. And
yeah. And that's nice. It sounds really nice, like Amber Jean.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
Yeah.
Like it like even sounds nice when like someone asks Autumn about the owl, and she's like, "Oh yeah, it's by Amber Jean, my friend." It's like, oh, it sounds so nice, you know. So it sounds really good. And then and Sodagi on the end is, you know, just like a little cherry on top or something to me,
Right?
You know.
Yeah.
I really like it.
And my mother's middle name was Jean, so that made that feel great. Betty Jean and Amber Jean, and I felt like Amber was sort of lofty and sort of soft and sort of out there, and like this smell of amber resin and perfume and oil and stone. And there's something about Jean that just kind of like drops you down into the Midland, you know, the heartland and the land, and kind of, and my Aunt Patricia would say it with a twang, you know, Amber Jean.
Amber Jean, yeah.
And it's just like, it kind of took the loftiness down to this sort of like just friendly level. I don't know about level, but approachability that fits and fits for me. So, yeah.
No. I totally think so too. I think it's great. It's perfect. You know, I don't know how to describe it any better, but
so we probably covered long enough about names, but it's interesting.
No, it isn't. I think it's very interesting, especially like with all of us come from some tribe. Eventually, how far you go back, it's going to be a tribe. You know, that's fact. You know, like so. Eventually, you probably had one of your ancestors. You know, I'm not saying you, but someone's ancestor had some name that had to do with the earth or an animal or whatever it might have been, you know, that resonated with them. So I think that's why, to me, names are important too. Cause like, and the example of your mom, you know, like kind of being overshadowed by an Elizabeth, you know, like that, I could definitely see that being, you know, a problem, you know, like we're not as freeing having a shared name, like, you know, I guess.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we come from tribe and then we also create tribe. And I think that's all well and good. Yeah. And so like, taking Raymond's name was part of me declaring my new tribe, part of a new tribe, the one that I was being accepted into and that I was inviting in. And that means a lot. And the Nsogidi family are beautiful, beautiful people. Yeah. And they have a wonderful history. And I feel so honored to be part of that tribe. I feel so honored to be part of that tribe. And I can be part of other tribes without taking their names. But there's just this extra pride that I get to be an Nsogidi via tribe, if not, you know, ancestrally. Yeah. Right?
Totally. Yeah, I like that. Like kind of bridging the two worlds, you know, like your past and into your future, you know, like yeah, I think it's really cool. And your approach on it is perfect. You know, like it's really good to view it that way. And I think people should, because community, we were talking a little earlier today about like community being so important, and I think it was us talking about that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think with the stuff we've been through, like with COVID and stuff, where we got more isolated. So I think now, especially, is important to get those community bonds back and build those bonds back together with folks, you know? Because I hadn't seen you in a long time, like since Arlie Rodeo or something, I think, you know? And
yeah,
because that like riff with the COVID and life and everything else happening, you know?
You were one of the first people we saw when we were starting to come out after COVID.
Oh,
when we made that trip for the rodeo and all of that, and we were around your brothers and the families and everybody, and then we got COVID.
Oh, really?
Because we'd come out, you know.
Yeah.
But that was totally worth it.
Yeah, and I felt the same way at the same time. 'Cause I think that was like one of our first like getting out and socializing again too, you know.
Yeah.
And we didn't get it, but I was just like accepting. I was like, oh well, if it happens, it happens.
Yeah.
I'll just battle it out, I guess, you know, and do the best I can. But you know, like prepping with like, you know, fluids and all the things I was going to do to help combat it, you know. So,
right. Yeah. And being around children and everything, and actually just thinking about that trip, packing for that trip is like a nice snapshot into a bit of my life that we could carry on from there. But Raymond was wanting to connect with the rodeo world again, and he was a retired bullfighter. So he has this tribe, he has this family that's in the rodeo world. And so we were going to go to Great Falls for this, was it national? What is it?
Circuit finals.
Circuit finals, which your brother fought as the bullfighter. And and there's some ice around there to climb, and it was winter, and I'm an ice climber, and Raymond's gotten interested in ice climbing as well, so he's an ice climber now too. So we're packing cowboy boots and cowboy hats and ice gear because we're gonna go climb ice. And he and there was an exhibit I wanted to see at the museum there, and then there's this big outdoor sculpture garden that's outside of there, and then of course we hit some hot springs and booked a room at this historical hotel that used to be a brothel. So I packed some lace, and it's okay, you know, like this is like, you know, we have the lace, and we have the helmet, and we have the hat, and we have the belt buckle, and we have the crampons, right? Yeah. So anyway, it's a full life, and it's good.
Oh, it's so cool. I mean, that snapshot, like if you could have that in a photo, is so cool because all that it encompasses, you know, and all of it's just amazing in its own way. Like you said, like the history of the brothel. So you got the lace, and then the crampons, and, you know, maybe an ice axe for the climbing, and then rodeo stuff, you know. So you got like a different style of clothing for the rodeo versus like going out and climbing an ice cliff, you know. So
right. Yeah.
Oh, it's so cool. But
yeah,
it's just amazing. You know, I think getting the most out of an adventure is kind of what that says to me, you know, and that's what I'm always trying to do as well. And I hope folks listening are taking that in too, to like for their next adventure, you know, like taking in consideration where you're going to stay even, you know, like, oh yeah, you know, add that to your trip a little bit too, you know.
Yeah.
And some people are just like, I'm just going to go throw a tent on the ground and go climb this thing, you know, which is okay. But, you know, you can make it better, I guess. I'm always trying to make my situation a little more cozy and memorable, you know.
Yeah. And that hotel's full of art from contemporary, like, Montanans, too. So they have art hanging in the halls. So it's like, you know, after being sequestered and things, just to go and get to see and be around art. So, like, you have that history, but then you have this opportunity to be in a live gallery, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can mix it up. It's okay.
Yeah, that's okay. That's another thing. I think, I don't know if that's like leftover from the 90s, but that seems like where it got ingrained in me is like, you know, like your radio, like especially in Montana for me, it felt like it was like you're a ski bum, you're a snowboarder, or you're rodeo. It's like you're one of the three, you're not all of it. And then like me and my brother were kind of more all of it, but you were not as, I don't know, you know, you're worried about like judgment and stuff, I guess. So like you're not as open with it. But then like once I got into college, then afterwards, like I don't care. You know, I wear cowboy boots, I go to rodeos, you know, I go ski and snowboard, I play hockey, smoke jumper. Like I got all these things that I do, and go to Hawaii and surf, you know, and beach bum it out, you know, a little bit too. So it's like,
for sure, I'm
trying to be all things, you know, not just one thing. But like, yeah, in the 90s or something, I don't know if it's, maybe I'm blaming the 90s and I'm wrong, but it just felt like it was more of a, in the boxes, you know, like you kind of make yourself like, I'm this, you know, like listen to punk rock and skateboarding or whatever it might be, you know. And yeah, then I get older, it's like I just like what I like, you know.
Yeah. And I think it's okay if somebody really delves deep in a box and that's where they are, but also I feel that it's a tendency, especially maybe perhaps Western society, to put everything in boxes. And I know the art world does that too. Like they want you to be just like you're a contemporary, you're Western, you do animal work, you're a sculptor, you know, it just, I think people feel more comfortable with labels and things. And like we were talking a little bit about medicine and medical, and like things get so separate, you know, in their boxes. Or anyway, it's just no judgment, just a way of looking at things. There's a reason for that, and like we have the filing cabinet what is it called when you go to the library?
Rolodex.
The library cards.
Like you're looking for books?
Because look, we haven't been in a library because we're on the internet now.
Like the Dewey Decimal System, or to look at books? What is it like?
Yeah, the card file. And when you go to the library, your listeners are gonna just be.
Hopefully they figure it out, because I wish I could help you.
Well, it did use the Dewey Decimal System.
Yeah, because that was like how you found like.
But it was called anyway.
Yeah, I can think of Rolodex is all for filing.
But when you go to the library, you go to the card file, but the card file is called something, and you can look up by the author or the title or the subject. You had all three. You could choose anyway.
Oh yeah, well, hopefully look it up. Man, I wish I could help you out, but I'm no help on this. I'm so sorry. Like just shotgunning things at you, and you're like, no, oh my bad. I wish man. I know what you mean though. Like you said, like you go to the card file, because like I remember before I figured that out, especially as a little kid, I'd just be like wandering around and I'd wonder how people could find books. And then I think in one of my classes in like second or third grade, we were taught to like, I think they gave us a title of a book and then go find it, you know? So we'd go to that kiosk or whatever it was, you know, and file through until we found it and then go get it and bring it back to the teacher and we got marked off, you know?
Yeah. So, I mean, it has a purpose. It's
Yeah.
okay. What I'm saying is it's okay to have labels and that kind of thing and boxes. And I don't know. We just kind of got off on a tangent, I think. We should roll into something else.
Yeah, we definitely can. And yeah, I think, but like you said, it's good because it's part of the tribe though, of like having that identity of like, you know, if you're like just country rodeo rancher or whatever, or skater, you know, but like, whatever whatever you enjoy doing. But like to me, I like to be into everything. I like to try everything. So like I want to, if someone's, I don't know, out in a cornfield doing something, I'm like, I've never done that before. Like, let me go check this out, you know? So I'm just curious, I guess, as a human. So, but yeah, like, I guess I wanted to cover Bozeman and then were you from Bozeman to Pennsylvania? Is that how that went?
Yeah. Oh, actually I went from Bozeman to Europe. So first I went to Europe. There was like, the exchange programs when you're in high school.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to get out and see the world. And I decided that was just like a way to do it. I didn't have a family that did adventure things like that. So I applied to 2 different exchange programs. And I was accepted by both. And one was going to send me to Italy, and the other was going to send me to Germany. And I had to make a decision. I was doing it all with my own money because I didn't have the backing of my parents. So I was working to save enough money to do the program fee or whatever. And I'd written this check that was like the biggest check I'd ever written at that point in my life. And to go to Italy because I thought, well, that's probably more art in my mind and at the top of my mind than Germany, I thought, I just was thinking of, I'm not sure. But then I got a letter that night before I mailed the check from the family in Germany that I got placed with, and they collected art.
Oh.
And I thought, oh, that's important. If they actually collect art, then they're actually involved in art. And actually German, I have a German heritage with the name Reinhard, and I knew people who spoke German because the Lutheran Church in Bozeman, there was beautiful German people who had come over from the war that I admired highly, and I thought German might be more useful than Italian. I didn't know anybody spoke Italian. I don't know. So I ripped up my check and I wrote a check for Germany, and so I went off to Germany. And later I got a letter from the family in Italy, and it turns out they were a little village near the Alps and all girls, and I didn't have any sisters, and they lived above the bakery. He was a baker.
Whoa.
And so it's like, that's one of those I took this road, and who would I be had I taken the road to Italy to this little village? Would I have discovered mountaineering sooner in my life and climbing sooner in my life, or would I have just eaten a lot of baked goods but had sisters, I don't know. I would just started studying the martial arts, and they were actually into the martial arts. It was super interesting. And then I went off to Germany, and this family that took me in, and it was I did learn a lot, but it was a big, hard transition for me. I remember in the beginning, feeling super alone and alienated, and this is it was airmail. It took a month. It took 2 weeks to get a letter over here, and then 2 weeks to get an answer over there. And it cost a lot to make a phone call. And so I could call home once a month, and it was cold, and there was no sunshine, not much of a blue sky ever. That was hard for me.
That'd be tough on me.
I was up in northern Germany.
Oh.
Yeah. And so, but there was beautiful things that happened, and of course it was really transformative and a good thing to do. So I went from Bozeman to Germany when I was 17 and did traveling over there, and then I came back and had a few small scholarships and started school at MSU, and was keen to get into to just do art school. I had this idea about art and European training and that kind of thing. And so I applied for a couple art schools, and the two I applied to, I was accepted into. One was in Chicago and the other one was in Philadelphia. Well, somebody told me that, so there's also just like a couple of accidents almost that happened that helped get me to where I ended up in Pennsylvania. And I went to the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts.
Oh, wow.
But somebody had talked about an art school in Philadelphia that was really amazing. And I had the opportunity to be there. So while I was there, I was at the museum where Rocky runs up the steps.
Oh, really?
In the movie.
Yeah.
And it's a great museum, but of course, I don't know, there was a thing about that. And then I asked one of the docents who worked at the museum, this sweet little older woman with her hair up in her head. I remember asking her about the art school. Where's the art school? And she goes, well, which art school? I didn't know there was more than one art school. And I was like,
oh, no.
The best, the art school.
Yeah, the one.
The best art. Oh,
yeah.
She said, you must be talking about the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. And it did not sound familiar, but I was like, oh, yeah, for sure. That must be.
That's the one.
That's got to be it. So that's the one I applied for. Well, it turns out that I don't think that was the one that had been recommended, but it was the one for me, and I'm glad.
Yeah.
And so, I got accepted, and I got like this almost full scholarship, and then you had to, get there, and like I charged a Greyhound bus ticket, and it took 5 days on a bus.
And you're how old?
I was in my early 20s.
Early 20s?
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
So,
super. Oh, I was 20.
Man.
Somewhere around then, and and get off and I think I was telling you I ended up living in a nunnery because I just had a couple $100 and it wasn't enough to get an apartment. But I found out that there was this nunnery that was rented rooms to girls for wayward girls, not really wayward girls, but just like a week at a time.
Yeah.
There was these rules. There was a curfew, which I messed up the first week and got locked out like my second day there or whatever, because they shut the door and locked them, and there was like a guard, and I wasn't used to a curfew, having lived on my own for enough time that and I'm just looking at him and he wouldn't let me in, and I'm like,
whoa.
What? So that ended up in a wonderful, crazy adventure, being out all night.
Yeah, nowhere to go.
I wandered the streets and there were homeless people. It just isn't something that in cold climate Montana that I saw that much. Not that I had some experiences in Europe and stuff, but there was like this. But I kind of migrated towards light and center, and then I heard music, and I ended up. I was outside a theater, and it was intermission, so people were coming out to smoke.
Oh.
And it was a play. And so I just walked in when they walked in, like I was supposed to be in there, and found an empty seat, and it was a warm place. I saw the second half of a play. Oh, cool. And then when the play got out, I was out on the street again. I didn't know and I kind of like followed my nose or my ear. I heard music coming from this one place. So I walked over towards it, and this model in my drawing class, like I had literally like 2 or 3 days into school, recognized me.
Oh.
And I recognized her because I had drawn her for 4 hours. Of course, I had drawn all of her for 4 hours because she was a nude model in a class.
Yeah.
And here she was, and she was a wild thing. And so I started dancing with her, and it was all this headbanging music and all this stuff. And then she invited me back to her place to spend the rest of the night once this place closed. So I didn't end up just sleeping on the streets, but I did end up on her couch, and she was keen to make out.
Oh, yeah. So she likes you more than friends.
She had this pierced tongue, and I was a little curious, and I didn't want to bum her out. And art school, the whole thing. Like I was like kind of open to it, but then also like. At one point, things didn't seem like they should go any further. It was a good idea, and so then which bummed her out. So then it did end up back out on the streets. And I was like not on the streets anymore. We were somewhere way far. I could see the tops of the buildings that were Center City where I lived, but that meant I was somewhere outside of that, and I just had to aim for it and make my way back. And
in the dark.
Eventually in the dark, and like, you know, there's this tribe in Africa, and I don't know what tribe, where they're the runners that can cross huge distances in crazy fast amounts of time. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah.
And I had heard or read about them, and they had this way of looking way ahead and using their peripheral vision so they wouldn't have to waste time looking down and hopping over things. And they had really exercised that ability to use peripheral vision. And so I would do that in the city. I would look ahead so that I wouldn't have to engage with people to look like a target.
Yeah, makes sense.
You know, kind of thing. It's not like I didn't want to engage with people, just in certain situations in places like that where there were things like there was this crazy guy coming up and just like freaking out, and now I would feel more confident engaging.
Yeah.
But as a young gal from Montana, it seemed like a good idea to be focused. Anyway, so I got back just in enough time to get into the nunnery and change clothes and go to school. But
dang, wild night.
Anyway.
Yeah. But no, I know the exact feeling you have, like, about like just going forward and cruising, because we took our class trip to San Francisco, and I don't know how it ended up happening, but somehow whoever was in charge of the trip booked it for one of the hostels in the Tenderloin district. So it was pretty gnarly, and a bunch of like little podunk Whitehall, Montana kids, and I, like an idiot, I show up in this super skin tight, like tank top thing, and like shorts. Like I'm like, we're going to the beach, and then like we just keep going into the city, and I'm like, ooh, all right. So everyone was real friendly with me when I showed up to the hostel. Me and the rest of my crew, who were dressed about the same, don't know anything Montanans. But then like the next morning, we go out. We have like a trip planned every day. We're going somewhere, and there was a lot of homeless people out there in the Tenderloin district, and a lot of people with mental illness and
Mm-hmm.
battling with it. So they're pretty wild, and I noticed that too. And I'm pretty friendly. I'll make eye contact typically and like say hello, especially in small towns.
Mm-hmm.
And we're walking down the road, and if I made eye contact with not anyone, but most of them, if I made eye contact with most of the homeless people or the people with mental illness, they would engage you, and they would come, like to you. So I was like, it was definitely better to peripherals, straightforward,
Yeah. Yeah. And like now I just was so, like, we just weren't exposed. But now I really appreciate and try to engage to a certain degree. It's just something you sort of, because they're human and they don't get to be seen. And I feel like the unseen, and I feel like it's important to not engage. But there was just that unexposed, being new, being young, and
not knowing,
protecting and survival, and so
because like for me, I didn't know how to react if they reacted. So like now that I'm older and I've been through a lot of reactions and stuff, and I know like what I can kind of expect, and there's enough space between me and them that I'm not that worried about. But as a kid, it's like, oh, whoa, all this energy just popping off the sidewalk at me. I'm like, oh, whoa, like not wanting that, it's like overwhelming. But now I'm older and been a little more worldly. It's not as bad. But it's funny, the periphery thing, when you were talking about it, all I was thinking about was on, like for those runners, it makes a lot of sense. Like, don't burn any other energy, like moving your head a bunch, just like straightforward and use the peripherals. Like for me, it was kind of the opposite for hiking. If we're going like along like one of those death marches on a fire, I was like right in front of me in the dirt. And I know you're not really supposed to do that, but if I like looked up, it would just like wear me out just looking at the end.
Just like it's different situations call for different things, and I totally believe in that as a way of navigating. So sometimes navigating would be, this general direction, but I think also like what you're talking about with those late night marches when you're fighting a fire, or when you're climbing, like rock climbing, and if you're thinking about the total objective, you have to be in the moment, and you're just trying to find the one next move. And that, I think, is a good analogy also in life. And also, like, even in the studio for me, sometimes if I'm in the moment and I'm just thinking about the one next move, then it's a very focused thing. And sometimes it just, like with rock, sometimes you can't find it. Like you're reaching out with your hand, you're just like trying to figure this out. And then maybe you just might need to shift your body just a tiny bit. And then, oh, you can find that hold that you need. Sometimes it's not like, and sometimes you have to take big leaps, right? So it's like, we have these skills and we get to use like the big gun, the the power tools or the hand tools, and the being willing to dive off or dive in, and also pulling back and being in the micro moment and paying attention and in that and that sort of meditative focus that you might have, especially if you're at night doing one of those hikes in with this,
endless.
You just have to be. You just have to do the next step.
Yeah.
And you don't know if you're going to be able to really make it to the top, but you just do the next step.
Yeah, exactly.
I got this one.
Yeah.
I got this one.
Yep.
Oh, I got that one too. I don't think I'm going to get, I got that one.
Yeah, there we are.
Here we go.
Get a little closer, a little closer. I'd be telling myself as I was going, and during rookie training, kind of do the same thing. You're just like, all right, I can do this all day. No, not a big deal. I can do this all day. And just like keep the mantra going, and even if it was like brutal,
Yeah. Yeah.
Man. So then, how long did you go to school in Pennsylvania?
I was there 2 semesters in 2 years. So I ended up showing up in the second half of a semester, or second half of the year for the second semester of the first year. And then I went back after a summer in the woods, which was also like wild transition, right?
Yeah.
That summer I was working trail crew with one other woman. We were the first female trail crew based out of the Bozeman district. And I worked an extra week just to make a little bit more money before I got on the plane to get out there. And that time I flew out.
Oh, nice.
Versus the long bus ride. And I flew in, and I had literally been in the woods the day before with a crosscut saw and leather, boots, firefighting boots, and the whole thing. And then I show up, and I had gotten a roommate. I had moved out of the nunnery partway through the previous year, and I was just sleeping on her kitchen floor. It was just like this still 2-room place, and she's all excited for me to be there, and she wants to go out, and so she's like pulling clothes out of her closet so we can go out, and that's another whole story. I could go off on a tangent, but it's just like to be from one world to another so quickly.
Yeah. Middle of nowhere woods, kind of slow pace to like city, going out, and going
out, having your roommate confess that she's fallen in love with you too, or whatever. Like, I might be finding a new place to live, and then I was looking out the window in the kitchen because it's so loud, like everything's so loud. And when you spent the summer in the wilderness, you don't have that level of sound, and it gets dark. Like in the city, it doesn't ever get dark. And the sky to me looks like this. Like my mom used to get coffee in these Folger cans, and the plastic lid would get kind of grimy looking. And in the night sky would just look like that you were looking at the top of this plastic coffee container. It just didn't have that clarity. I couldn't see stars. I couldn't at night, and so I was looking out the window, feeling really disoriented. And we were just one story up in the alley below, and there were 2 people that were just about ready to commence making love right below my window. And I was watching, and I thought, man, she's really flexible. And then I get to paying. It was 2 guys, and this one transvestite prostitute who worked our corner. It was him and this other person had a skirt on, and yesterday I'm in the city. Yesterday I was in the woods, and now I'm here, and it's like bing bang boom, like full on in to this whole other world, which is an intense world. But they both have their intensity, and some people from that world would freak to be in the backcountry alone or whatever, which I was more comfortable with. And I always felt less alone in the wilderness than I did when I lived in the city, for me.
Yeah, that resonates.
Talk about disconnect and not making eye contact and that kind of thing. Like in that for me, feeling like I needed to protect because it was not my environment and the energy. I think cities have a wonderful, intense, like city energy, mountain energy, river energy, ocean energy. Like those are some of the big ones.
Yeah.
And they're huge. But for me, and I think this is personal for everybody, for me, the city is better in small doses.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a shot of whiskey.
Yeah.
Like I'll land in the city and then when I get back on the plane, in some ways I feel like I'm kind of a little reeling and a little wobbly and a little, just a little disoriented from, especially back then when I wasn't doing it as much, like whirling a little from.
I get a little bit too, like just going down to Tijuana for, my stem cell treatments, hopping on little plane in Missoula, going to Salt Lake, and it's like it builds, right? So you get like Salt Lake's big hub, and then San Diego's packed, and then you go to like Tijuana, it's packed, and it's like I'm ready to get back to small town Montana by the time I'm done with my week,
Okay.
Yeah. So all you said, what all you're saying there really resonates with me, because I kind of felt the same way. Like you're in this big giant, pot of people, but like for me, it's not my energy. So it's more draining than building. But I've heard like people say the opposite though, where they go
exactly
to like New York, that like no one sleeps there. It's constantly bustling, and it you vibe off it, and then you do more because you're getting the juice from the city, from the energy from the city. And like for me, it'd be the opposite. I'd be getting drained.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's good to know what fuels and what might make one, take energy or whatever. But it's also good to mix environments and not just stay where we're comfortable.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. And when you do go and mix like that, then you come back with new eyes. Like, you pay attention to your world in a new way also, because you might have more appreciation, but you might also see it like somebody who from the outside would see it. And so I do think that's a blessing it's a real privilege to be able to travel, and it's not something that everyone gets to do, and I don't get to do it as much as I'd like, but it's also even environmentally, like I kind of wonder, I want to be intentional about it when I do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, same. And just like take it in, and I always try to look for the positives, because it's easy to, especially, going from the country to the city, it's easy to see all the negative, and, so I try to like get something out of my trip, in a positive way, versus like being like the traffic, the people, the loud, the whatever, like.
Absolutely.
I try to focus on other things, it's all there, but.
And you can be energized, and I am. Yeah. It's like, with the firefighting or like going for a summit, it can be hard and draining on some levels, and you might have to recover from it afterwards, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
And it pushes you beyond your norm, and it's worth the recovery. Like just staying where you're comfortable and then that zone isn't for me the way I live my life. Like I want to push those boundaries, and then so you go to those places, and then you come back and you recover, but then you're also richer.
Yeah.
And you have all of this new, like you said, vibe, new perception, a lot of appreciation and connection, just so much.
Yeah.
It's important.
And all the things like the little smaller benefits like that come off that, like the accomplishment, and then, but when I get down from like a summit, like I'm like, yeah, I've been on top of that, like, around Whitehall. I'm like, man, I've been on top of that tabletop and on top of that Brownback, like, so I got these places I can point to that I know what it looks like up there, but also like directly after I get down, usually I am drained. And like we were talking about sugar before this, that is the time when I will have like Kalispell Creamery makes his chocolate milk, like something like that waiting for me, because my glucose, like my blood glucose is down. Like I need some sugar and like some kind of quick calories. So I'll have like something like that, like a peanut butter and honey, and usually like in a thing waiting for me when I get back. And then I go home and make like a big meal, and then sauna, or if I'm super sore, I know I'm gonna be wrecked, I'll do like maybe like a CBD bath. It's just like such a good like wind down from this day, and I get to kind of reminisce on the adventure, you know. So to me, it's so beneficial in so many different ways than just being on top of a mountain, I guess, you know.
Yeah.
But getting the view on top of a mountain is pretty cool too. That's why I'm getting up there. But you know, the rest of it, the smaller things that come in too is awesome. So it pushes me, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep derailing us, but so Pennsylvania to did you have more on Pennsylvania, I guess, or?
Yeah, and then college was it took me longer to go through college because I had to make money to get through, and I did all sorts of jobs, and I had a round of mono.
Oh, dang! Oh.
And I think it came from some stress, and I was an insomniac, and some other things happened. There's some trauma after a horrific accident and that kind of thing. And then I ended up with mono, and so like I ended up having to take a semester off.
Oh.
You know, things like that.
Yeah.
You know, then. All the different jobs.
Yeah, I guess I was going to ask you the jobs. How'd you get involved in the Forest Service? Like
it was there's a lot of summer jobs that can happen, so that kind of is helpful with school.
Yeah. The Forest Service is perfect for that. You know, seasonal work.
The Forest Service and the BLM. I was officially hired by the BLM first, and to build part of the Continental Divide Trail.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
It was pretty. Has some stories. I didn't stick the whole summer out. I was part of a 4-person crew, and they had hired. The district had wanted to bring some female, women in, and there's like this whole way, with the government of how you get paid if you, and they really there was a vet who was going to run the crew.
Yeah.
And then there was. The other gal had grown up on a ranch, so like what is it the levels that you get paid, like whatever GS2, GS1, 2, 3. Anyway, since I was brand new and just being pulled in, I was the lower level, and this one gal, they gave her a higher level because she came from a ranch, and they just valued that as like a potential hard worker person.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like. It's interesting how we have these ideas and classifications, but she was really out of shape, and she couldn't even hike to where we were supposed to start the trail. Like we had to take care of her,
Yeah.
and the vet person, unfortunately, was having some real issues had never led a crew and was dealing with war trauma and that kind of thing. And so I ended up like running this crew, not on purpose, just because to get stuff done.
Yeah.
And we would go out for 5 days at a time. And my boss, when we came back in after like the first or second week, he said he just really called me in, and he really appreciated what I was doing, and he knew that I was running the crew, and that he was complimenting me, and I says, well, thank you. Can I have a raise? I felt like since I was running the crew, I should get paid as much as the person who was
supposed to be running the crew.
Yeah, because they were 2 levels higher than me, and I was taking care of the person who was 1 level higher than me and doing like double the work. And he said, God, I'd love to do that, but I can't. And meanwhile, the Forest Service had offered me another job working as trail crew with just one other female, just the 2 of us. And they were going to pay me more.
Yeah.
And they were going to pay per diem. All that stuff matters when you're
broke.
I don't know, when you're broke and trying to put yourself through school. So I jumped ship.
Yeah.
So I was only 2 weeks on the Continental Divide Trail, I think, maybe 3, I don't know. And then I jumped ship, and I just started working on with this other woman, and that was the beginning of trail, of like the Forest Service stuff. And then the next summer I was on a fire crew.
Oh yeah.
Which was also sort of an accident.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't apply. I had a boyfriend who had invited me to go climb Cotopaxi in Chimborazo, and I wasn't a climber then. I I was new to all that, and he didn't have to work, and I wasn't sure about taking the summer off because I needed money.
Yeah.
But then the idea of going and climbing over there was, I was really keen, and I thought I should be able to sacrifice for the relation. Anyway, I didn't apply for summer jobs, and then he got invited to teach a surf camp out on an island somewhere.
Oh, really?
And to go on down the Grand Canyon for 3 weeks at the beginning of the summer. And I couldn't do that because my brother was getting married in the middle of that. So he took off.
Oh.
And I remember I made breakfast for all these people who were leaving for the Grand Canyon, and I didn't get to go on the adventure. And I just finished my finals the day before, and everybody just left for this great adventure. And I thought I was going to climb Cotopaxi and Chimborazo, and now all of a sudden he was going to be coming back from that adventure and leaving the country.
Oh.
And I get this phone call, random, from the fire boss from the district based out of West Yellowstone. And he said, "Hey, are you looking for a summer job?" Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
This is like they were trying to find some women. They were trying to get some women into some of these jobs, I think. Because he said he had was out calling around. I found this out later. He was calling around and he asked if they knew of any women, and he wanted a female on the crew. And they said they had this pair who had worked on trail. And he said, "Well, which one could pack the most hose?"
Yeah. Looking for a strong
That
back.
sounds wrong.
Yeah.
But they said Amber, so he called me.
Yeah.
And I said, "What do you do if there's not a fire? Because I want to do stuff.
Yeah.
I don't want to come out and just wait for a fire." And he's like, "Oh no, we do projects and stuff." So I packed up, and so when my boyfriend came back, I wasn't there.
Yeah, I don't blame you. You take off on your ventures and leave me. Yeah.
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 That was the beginning of the end of that relationship, or maybe the ending had happened way before that. But anyway, so then I was trail crew, and I was the fire management officer, which was kind of funny. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, I got to do some firefighting and things. And then I was offered to come back the next summer as a wilderness ranger.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. That was the creme.
Yeah.
The creme de creme
Yeah.
for me, as far as that was not an easy job to quit to go full time as an artist. But at the same time, doing a seasonal job wasn't quite enough money to live, so it was like when I jumped from that, to full-time artist, that was kind of a big leap or whatever.
Yeah, big jump for sure. And how did you know? Like, were you just like, all right, this not make ends meet here, so if I go full-time artist, then maybe I'll make some ends meet, and then the ceiling is kind of, it's not really limited like it is in the fire world, like you can get higher than the fire world, but it takes a while, and you're still like you only make so much a year, and you're gone all the time. So like, I guess like did you just had a gut feeling?
It wasn't, well, I think it wasn't quite, it happened more, it happened, it wasn't like I just stopped and thought about it. I just graduated, I went straight off that summer to be a wilderness ranger for the summer.
Yeah.
And then I started to have this idea about the time I was graduating, that once I did my summer job and once it was over, then I was going to get in my little Ford Ranger truck, and I was just going to drive into communities around the state, little communities, and ask around. And that maybe I had this idea that there was perhaps a widowed rancher's wife who might need some help.
Oh.
And because it was a ranch, and because she was widowed, there would be a shop full of tools that wasn't being used, and that maybe I could then have tools in a shop, and I would help her out somehow. And sometimes, as I was imagining this possibility, which I thought was a very real possibility, but then I would kind of go off on my own tangent, that she was a very worldly, schooled, with the library rancher's wife, who then also wanted a travel companion. Anyway, that was my plan, was just to go off and find a place to where I could exchange living quarters in a shop space for working around the ranch, and then I could start making art.
Yeah.
Instead, what happened is at the very end of the summer, being a wilderness ranger and spending my time alone in the backcountry, I was sent on a fire in the crazy mountains, and as part of a 2-person saw team. And it was on this fire that I met this logger, Cliff, actually 3 loggers, Cliff, Ralph, and Mo. And Cliff and I became buddies. We ended up working together on the fire. I ended up being a swamper for him on the saw team. And when I got back after that fire to the district, he'd left a message for me and said, "Hey, you left your axe in my truck. You want to get together for a drink?" Which is just kind of led to a friendship. And he's the one who lived at the end of the road and had built this cabin without plumbing and electricity, and had a tractor-powered sawmill that he'd sawn the logs for the cabin, and then he'd sawn the boards for the floors off of the logs in the tractor-powered sawmill. And This is where he lived. And he'd also created a small cabin. It wasn't a cabin in the log cabin, it's more like a shack because it was plywood, and it was on the very top of the mountain. So his cabin was at the end of the road, and then he'd created this other smaller like shack basically on the tip top of the mountain that was literally cabled to the rocks.
So cool.
On the top of this mountain to keep it from blowing off down into the Yellowstone River 1,000 feet below.
Just like a lookout
Actually,
tower.
more than 1,000 feet below. His cabin's 1,000 feet above, and then this was even higher. So he built it because he thought it would be a good place to wake up and be able to harvest an elk. And he offered that as a free place for me to live then at the end of the summer. And that was a great, all I needed as an invitation was this free place to live. So then that was the winter. So the next spring, my boss who had hired me as a wilderness ranger had moved to a different district in Alaska and was interested in having me come be a river ranger there, which was pretty damn tempting.
Yeah.
But I had gotten dug in a little bit, and this old guy across town, Smokey Hewson, who lived in this trailer park with his sweet wife, had this little shop. He was letting me, this wood shop he wasn't using anymore, so he let me use. I had this wood shop for free, so I had a free place to create art and a free place to live. And my monthly overhead was $200 a month, and $101 of that went to my school loan. And so I had some freedom there.
Yeah, and a base camp. You know, you got a base camp down. Yeah.
And if I left for Alaska, then I would be losing the momentum I had started in the studio over the winter.
Yeah.
And so, it just was sort of, it wasn't like I knew. I just, it was a gut in the moment, but it wasn't super thought out way ahead of time, I guess, you know.
I like how it all came together, like, you know, like found a place to live, and then you found a place to work, you know, and all that you could afford, you know, and to get your, like, springboard, your jump start, you know, like to your starting point, I guess, is simple as you could say. Yeah. And then having the fire background, the saw background, and then, like you're telling me earlier, like Cliff being a logger for forever, right? So, and having his own mill, and then because we were talking about this earlier, so like I have somewhere around like 16 years of experience, and in the fire world, you know, fighting fire. So like a lot of that is running a saw, you know, especially as a younger, strong back fella, and that's what I want to do is run saw a lot. And we're talking about the difference though of like how we run saw, getting trained by the Forest Service versus how a logger runs saw. Okay. Yeah, and so the skill that being able to get under that wing is huge, because a lot of times when I'm out there, at least when I used to be, when I'd be out there with the contract fallers, which are typically loggers, can't log anymore because of the fires, the fire season's too dangerous. So like their operations shut down, so they come out and contract with the Forest Service to fall dangerous trees, and it's just like effortless for them. And they're just, to me, they're so much better with the saw, their techniques, the way they sharpen, at least the ones I was running into. So like I'm a little bit jealous, I guess, what I'm saying, you know. The experience. I know, because like we were sharing earlier, when I ended up working with Cliff on this fire, he had a 36-inch bar on his saw, which is
damn impressive.
It's
right?
long. Yeah, it's out there.
And it was not a big deal to him. Like it didn't look big on him. He didn't wield it like a big saw, and he had skill. I found out years later, like he would never brag. Like he's just, that was one of the things that I also liked about the smoke jumpers, because I was working ground crew, and the smoke jumpers are always that I got to work with or do things with were always trying to talk me into coming over to their camp, their tribe. Like you should be one of us, the smoke jumpers. And there was a lot about that I love. But one of the things that was intriguing, that was compelling, but one of the things that I appreciated about my experience with them, at least this crew, was that they didn't brag. They didn't need to brag. Like they were solid in who they were. Yeah. And they were loving what they did, and they were pursuing because of a passion. And that is my tribe. There's something. So anyway, Cliff, obviously he didn't like to break, but somebody told me once that there was an article in the paper, the Livingston paper. It was not a big paper, but there's some article. I'm not sure if it was about him in particular, about loggers as a trade, but he was known, and he could saw 300 and some trees a day on an average daily basis. Yeah. Okay, so I'm a tree lover. Big time. My work, a lot of my sculptures that I feel really strong about are working with trees that have been killed in forest fires. So saying that feels like the wrong picture to give of Cliff, this person whom I ended up calling the Zen logger, because this man was more connected to wilderness and woods and Mother Nature and the natural cycle of things without human intervention than what a person who would want to stereotypify a logger as somebody destructive would be. And in fact, he had logged some of the property that he had up there, which I now have the fortune of owning and sharing with Raymond and living on. Yeah. But the way he logged it was in this natural way that mimicked what Mother Nature would do with a fire, like coming through and leaving patches of trees so that they can be homes for forest animals, and doing it in a way that it wasn't just clear cutting and he wasn't like that. He wasn't of that tribe. And it was something that so I just have to clarify that part about him. But seeing him saw on the fire, and then I asked him if he would teach me what he knew. And then I got lazy about certain things, because having him in my life after that, having moved on the mountain, like I was telling you earlier, then I never was good at sharpening his chainsaw, and he was so good and so fast that I just got worse, because he would just keep my saws, keep them all sharp, for awesome. Me.
Yeah, man, that's so cool.
Like my saw leprechaun.
Yeah, that's so good. And especially the stuff that you do, like the real intricate work, like, and I'm not sure if you're doing with the saw, but like I saw on your webpage or Instagram of you cutting into one of your big, looked like a reliquary. Reliquary? Yeah, am I saying that right?
Reliquary tree pieces.
Yeah, it looked like you were cutting into it with a chainsaw. And I imagine, like, at least in my experience, the sharper the saw, the better. It cuts easier. You get a better cut and all that, the stuff that goes along with it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was actually in that picture using the chainsaw for texture. Oh. And I should have pointed that out when you were up there earlier. But so those trees were sawn on a sawmill, but opened up, and then I would use power tools to carve on them. But then I would get to where I could create a really beautiful texture with a chainsaw as part of my. So sometimes I would saw, and remove a lot of wood and be able to remove it fast, and that was the thing. But then maybe this was a feminine approach to the saw, but I could take a saw and with sharp teeth, and I could create a really feathery texture that I think is really beautiful. And so that is something that I continue to use in my work.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. Like, your work's so amazing. And I didn't want to jump ahead, but when you were talking about like tribe and stuff, and we were talking about connections, you would just take me to your clock. What's the name of that piece?
Yesterday's Tomorrow.
Yesterday's Tomorrow. Yeah, and man, and I don't know if you want to talk about that at all, but the story that you told me behind the whole thing, like going from like this idea into like tragedy and almost being the end of the project to it being an opportunity, like I thought it was incredible.
Yeah, well, there's a period in my life where I participated in this show called the Western Design Conference once a year that took place in Cody, Wyoming in September. And I would take each person who participated in the show. It wasn't an art show per se. It was more craftsmen, like people who worked with, well, there's a huge show that happens in the museum, an auction every year, that time of year, and the Western Design Conference piggybacked on that.
Oh.
So people who flew in like on private jets and stuff for this art auction would also then attend this other conference. And this other conference was a lot of craftspeople from across the country who were really good furniture makers and jewelry makers and clothing makers and work with antler and these materials who were juried into the show would bring a piece for the show. And there was competitions and it became really well known. It's like this top kind of show for that in the country. So I became part of this show each year, and I would take a piece and compete and have that piece for the show, and then I would book commissions, usually at the show for the rest of the year. And the commissions allowed me to work with materials I couldn't afford on my own, and they allowed me to do things to push my boundaries and my skills in new directions. And they would bring in the money I needed for my life, but then to also, like, I would basically buy myself some months to do my own piece again, my own work again.
Oh yeah.
And so the piece you're talking about, Yesterday's Tomorrow, was a piece I made one year because I wanted to create a piece about the wilderness in particular, about my feeling of the wilderness and bring the wilderness in a way that people could experience it or have a sense of it the way I had a sense of it.
Yeah.
And I had created a piece before called Spirits Untamed that was a bed, that it was about the West. And it was like, I was really trying to have people have an experience of the West. So instead of just creating a sculpture, I created a functional piece, which was a bed that was larger than a normal bed. And it had horses that were almost life-size carved. And it had juniper, which is a very Western wood to me that lives in harsh conditions, and it gets bent and stuff from the environment. And I wanted the bed to feel big, like, and grand, like the West. So when you got into it, you had that feeling of how great, grand, and how this. And so there was this whole thing. So then not the next year, but another year, I wanted to do the wilderness. And that was like taking people a step deeper into the world that I get to experience out here. Where Western to me is more civilized. It has something to do with people living, not civilized, but like, what's the word? Just it has something to do about people. The West is people moving into like being on the land and community on the land, and the wilderness is another step further from that. So I wanted to bring in an animal for the West, for the wilderness, which for me was the wolf.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to help you plug the West thing. It is tough. It's like it's more like in contact with humans.
Like settlement, people coming out, settling. There were people who lived here before who weren't coming out to settle. But there's something about when I hear the word West that has, and for the animal I chose for that was wild horses, because there was something about wild horses. But then there's this domestic part that, so there was like this both of those two worlds. And then for the wilderness, it's just another step. And part of wilderness is also fire.
Yeah.
And having come from the world of firefighting, then, there's this idea of wilderness management and managing the wilderness, which is like trying to manage Mother Nature. And yes, now wilderness is under management because of civilization, because of people living around on the border and that kind of thing. And people look at fires as a bad thing and a negative thing, but fires in their natural state are as part of how Mother Nature does housekeeping, and they need to happen. And because we haven't allowed them to happen in certain places, now they're like happening on these more huge levels because they haven't been allowed to happen on the smaller levels. But also, like, things did happen on big levels, but there weren't people around, so it wasn't that part of tragedy, So
There wasn't
So
a house.
people have this negative concept when it's not a fully negative thing. And the truth is, like, life is cycles, and we come, there's birth and there's death, and everything is cyclical, and Mother Nature has these cycles, and destruction is part of creation, and fire is part of life. And so I was playing with all these concepts, trying to bring them all together, wanted to make a piece. And when it came to the idea of like managing wilderness, I thought time to make a clock with time, which would also show cycles, but make us think about the future and the past. Yesterday's tomorrow. Like, I feel like tomorrow is affected by yesterday.
Yeah.
And so there's this cycle there, and I just wanted to kind of bring some attention towards that and intention about that in this piece. And so the clock had to be bigger than a normal clock and bigger than a normal grandfather clock. And so I call it a great grandfather clock, which has just an extra level of that reverence. And then I brought in the wolves, and then I had this beautiful piece of juniper that Cliff had found for me that was exceptionally large for juniper, especially in this region. And I had it sawn in half in a certain way, and the whole clock was designed around, and it was going to be sandwiched between this juniper. So there was the two halves of the juniper on this clock, and the wolves would be carved like almost life size, one inside the clock, one outside the clock, with the trees inside the clock. And I don't like sanding, and I'd hired the sanding out to be done by somebody else. I just don't like sanding, and it's just boring.
It's a mess.
It's just boring and mechanical, and I can see where it could be meditative for somebody. It's just not my jam.
Yeah.
I like chisel marks and having my hands on wood, and so I had hired that part out to somebody who I'd hired something similar with before, who knew what I wanted and how I wanted some parts of the juniper polished, almost like you would polish a stone, but other parts left very rough and natural in that state and aged. And anyway, this person took longer than I thought, or I called to check on it, and his brother answered the phone and told me that the person I'd hired had gone to help on a fire. And I'm like, oh no, because I had a deadline, because the Western Design Conference would be happening, and I couldn't change that date, and I had to have this piece. And I had a carpenter I'd hired to make the clock body so that I could carve it, and that was in the works, and it was based on this log. And I freak out knowing that this log was in somebody else's hands that hadn't been trained by me and knew what I wanted. And Cliff took off, because it was in another town, and took off to go get it and rescue it for me and brought it back. And it had been ruined. I thought it had been ruined because he didn't have that touch and that fine touch. And it was very mechanical, and he'd hit parts of this naturally curvy wood where it shouldn't have been hit with like the edges, the descender and all of this. And I told you I started crying.
Yeah, I don't blame you though, because you had these ideas and this plan.
Yeah, and it was ruined. It was just ruined, and I'm like, it's ruined. And Cliff, who hated it when I cried, he's like, it'll be okay, honey. It'll be okay. We can fix it, honey. And I'm like, you can't fix it. It's wood. Like, as a carver, one of the things about carving is you can't put wood back on. You can only take it off. So you have to be very intentional about it. And this would have been, you can't put that raw barky surface back on. And
no way, it would never look right.
No,
you try to glue it or anything.
This is like really expensive firewood, and I was like, oh, firewood. It was just burn it, and I went, oh, burn it. And I grabbed a propane torch that I had in the studio, and I just started burning the parts that I considered fucked up.
Yeah.
And then as I was burning it was getting black. It was beautiful. And it was just like, and it was very cathartic. And the whole process of what I was intending to go into when I started the piece the piece forced me to go into it in a deeper way than I had even imagined. And this wood got to where it was really black. And then the parts that were polished were really light and light, yellow and light and gold, and it had that beautiful contrast. And so it was like, even alchemically, what happened at that stage in the project, or what happens with fire and what happens with us. And as I was telling you, like in the creative process, for me, at least what I've found and what happens over and over and over again, is that no matter what, like I'll start off with a vision and a direction and these ideas, and then there's this whole character of the materials I'm working with and the process that's beyond me. It's outside of me, and it's sort of a dance. And I have to know when to get out of the way and let my partner take over. And then like, it's like this dance of being able to complement each other, you know, but then just like in a lot of things in partnerships in life, there's times when you don't get along at all, and it just like brings you to your knees. But in the creative process, even if I'm not in partnership with the piece at a point, it always comes to a point where it's got the better of me and it's broken me. Like I am just like at wit's end. And I think like when you're talking about the death march, or when you're talking about mountaineering, like what we've experienced in those worlds can do the same thing, where you're just brought to your edges of rawness and not sure. And somehow you have to dig deep. But in the creative process, right at that moment, at some point in that horrible place. And by horrible, I just mean, I feel like I've lost it all in the vision I have to give up on or whatever. Right somewhere in that destruction and death and everything, where I feel I failed, is where it just starts to come together again.
Yeah, like I don't know if it's too far to say like rebirth almost, but like to me it was, encapsulates what you mentioned earlier about fire. Like it fire comes through, and especially in an area that you've, like especially for us growing up in Montana, it's like a spot where you may have hiked and spent a lot of your time, and all of a sudden it gets burned over, and if it burns hot, it just wrecks everything, and you're like, oh, it's over. But then you give it time, and as fast as spring comes, you got green, you got plants coming back, you have mushrooms, life is back in there. And then just a couple of years later, you got the regrowth of lodgepole, pea pine, like whatever, Doug fir, whatever is in the area, tamarack, larch, western larch, and yeah, it's back. It doesn't take a long time, but at first the first tragedy of the wildfire coming through, and like the sanding incident, it's just like, oh, it's over. Like this beautiful thing's dead, but it's not. It's just changed for a minute, and then the burning it. I didn't have, I can't like look in your brain and see exactly how you had a vision for the original with the patina and the bark on it, but man, seeing it right now, what it is. Yeah. Holy cow. It looks
needed
amazing.
To be that way. And it knew that, like, it just like that needed to happen. And there's always these gifts. And even if you look over the trajectory of a life, like I've had some serious hardship, and I've had some real trauma, and all those things are what made me. And in those places, like I got to discover even more who I am, and be like released from things I thought I should be, that kind of thing. And also community, like that's where we take care of each other too, in some directions, in some ways in life. Like I don't know how to explain it, but I just know that it's better to embrace it. And I honestly, like most of my work, no matter what series I'm working on, no matter what medium, no matter what I'm doing, a lot of my work has to do with this dance between the dark and the light.
Yeah, and I think that's what I noticed in your work a little bit too. Like, I didn't really say it, but this is one of Amber's pieces here. But the amazing thing about this, and I wish I could kind of show you with my hands, because it's like the size, the original, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Amber, the size of it is like, it's like a little square, right? The size that you originally did.
Yeah.
And then you had a fellow blow it up like this, and which is wild to me, because anyone, especially like our age, because we kind of grew up with like scanners, like, in the primitive stages, to get anything from back in the day to blow up, this would be blurry as hell. The eye would be gone. The ears wouldn't make sense.
You never could do that.
Yes.
Technically.
So the clarity in this is amazing.
Yeah.
And this is one of the more like lighter pieces, I would say, just in what I've seen. But then you have the other pieces that are similar, that have the light and the dark, and the blend is amazing to me. The contrast.
Yeah, and just like you're saying, we came from the time where if you did want to do a reproduction of anything, you had to make it smaller because you couldn't make it bigger because we didn't have the quality. And I didn't actually ever intend on. I didn't know you could make. So the original was like 3 inches by 3 inches, and the one we're looking at is like 18 by 18 inches, which is a lot bigger. And I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know technology had gotten there. He had just done it on his own. So when I went back to pick up my pieces after having him photograph them so that I would have a record of them, he had just done it. I didn't even recognize it at first when he first picked it up. And I was like, and then I went, oh my gosh. And yeah, there's things that show up in there that don't show up in the small one. And I was so tickled. So it was just another thing, like community and going back beyond what I knew possible and having somebody else just see that in his own studio and decide to blow it up and show me.
Yeah.
He didn't talk about it, like just the possibility and what was there. And then what happened to like these light little pencil marks that end up being big strokes on a piece when you blow it up that big, then they get to be looser and there's a different energy, which then it's like somebody teaching you new dance moves. So now going back in the studio after seeing something that I did small become big, then I like, so on the big might be, that move.
Yeah.
Whoosh, kind of thing. So yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. More in your toolbox, like
exactly.
That is, I never thought about it that way. Like that well, that's what's cool about like you. I mean, like I think I kind of said in the beginning, like how much, or maybe I've just been saying it all day. I'm gonna keep saying it. Being around you and Raymond is amazing because of that. Like the way your brain works in that, like you're not rigid, and I don't think you really can be to be an artist. That right? To be rigid on ideas, like you.
I think you can be. I think for sure you can be, and I think some artists are very methodical, and there's a thing about that. And I think I don't know,
part of the process.
Yeah, I think it can be, but I think personally for me, it's better not to be. And it's any profession. I don't know about profession. It could be profession, but people talk about flow state.
Yeah.
Where you get so into the state that that you're part of something bigger, and that something is moving through you, and you're just an instrument. Then I think for me, that's something that happens in my work sometimes.
I was wondering.
And it can take work, like you take somebody who's surfs big waves. And there's this amount of training and work and all the times they fall and all the bones they break. And there's like all of that stuff. And, there's the piles of wood chips and the, in the tired muscles and all of that. And just all the hours it takes to be able to master something, or I don't know if I like the word master. I don't really, but like as a musician, you might learn chords. So then you can let go of the chords because then you can you can go beyond, that kind of thing. Anyway, so I think there's that the accident, the happy accident, the allowing, the tapping in and having something come through you, Do
you take breaks? Like if you're hitting a wall with something, or you're like, well, I'm done for the day. I'll come back to this tomorrow or later or whatever. Do you do that?
I think there's also something that is a good question because there's two answers, yes and no.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a time to push through, so you don't, and you just keep working, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. There's
a time to step away, take a moment, take a breath, take a nap, take a walk in the woods. Allow that space between, allow dream between, that kind of thing. And it's a fine line. I think I keep going back to mountaineers, and maybe it's the time of year or something, but
I think so, yeah.
I think you get better at that fine line of knowing when to hold them and knowing when to fold them. Like you get, the more you push that edge, the better you get at making that decision in the moment. The instinct, do I go for the summit? We only have this much light. There's a storm coming. Do we have enough time to get down safely? Is it worth the risk? Is it worth losing everything because this is something I want so bad that I'm going to go for it? And I do. And I don't think there's any right or wrong way. And I think sometimes with my work, the risk in the studio is just that you have a mess and you fuck it up.
Yeah.
And you ruin something. And then in my case, sometimes that ruining can be months of work and lots of money. Like I told you, I had $18,000 in that great-grandfather clock before I even packed it up into a trailer and hauled it off to a show. And I didn't have indoor plumbing or electricity in my home. Like my cabin was basic, and I had credit cards, and I had this dream, and I had this belief that this piece had to be made, right? Yeah. And that it would find a home. But so you take these kinds of risks. But so when that tree felt like it was so ruined at that one point, I had everything and beyond everything financially in my life in this piece, And so, I mean, we take certain risks, and there's mountaineers who will say it was worth it. Like they might not have come back, and there's ones who haven't come back that made a choice. And so those are big questions, and this is much littler. But you know what I'm saying about, like, sometimes you take a break and sometimes you don't. Yeah. And sometimes you make the wrong decision in that moment, and that's okay too, because what is it they say about making mistakes, like the knowledge you get from making mistakes? How does that quote
I know. Go? Yeah, I'm fuzzy on it, but I know what you mean.
But you only get that knowledge by making, that kind of thing. So anyway, it's
like learning from failure kind of deal too. You only get it by failing. So it's like
you have to be willing to mess up. So you have to be willing to push it and play.
Yeah, and risk it.
And there's also something to be said. Some of my work is really meditative, and it just happens a little bit at a time. Like the series you saw today with the Secret Keepers, I call it the Secret Keepers series, with the turkey with the skulls. Yeah. And they're very meditative pieces, so they just happen. And some of these pieces, when I'm working on them, the layers, the painting like we're looking at, the layers happen over days and weeks. And so I'll come back to it. And like, I think maybe like someone who would be working on a poem or something, but sometimes you just like, and the poem's right there. Yeah. So it depends.
Makes sense to me. And for me, I kind of, akin to working on cars. Mm-hmm. So like I read this book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Mm-hmm. And and one of the things I grabbed from that was that walk away from something if you like hit this point, like you were kind of talking about, like, and it was like a frustration point where you're doing more damage than good, but like you'd have to know that in yourself, so you got to kind of get there. And so I had ruined some things before, and I remember the clutch cable went out on my motorcycle, and I just happened to be reading the book at the time, and I was like, and it's one of those stupid things. It's just a cable. You attach it at the grip, and you attach it at the bottom, mm-hmm. where it goes into the clutch, and you're like, should be super easy. Not a whole lot of work there, right? You just got to snake it through the middle of the motorcycle. And I was like, all right, I got this. And then like got into it like an hour in. I'm struggling to get the old cable out, or something's happening. Like just all these things that's making it twice as hard. It feels like a gremlin's in there like working against you. And then that builds up my frustration. And I'm on the verge of probably breaking something and having to repair something else. So luckily I just read that part in the book, not the day before or something. So I was like, all right, we're done today. Mm-hmm. So like I put everything down, left, went back inside, came back the next morning, and I was already like, still, a little bit of like frustration. So I was trying to like going easy. Got like some really chill Hawaiian music on, and had my dog with me, and we were just like hanging out, opened the garage door, and we're in Arizona, and it's my only way of transportation. So like I need to get this thing fixed so I can actually like go places. Only mode of transportation. So I get in the Zen mood and like flow, like that flow state you're kind of talking about. Like it's not the same as like producing something, but it was like more of a flow state, as in like things went super smooth. My mind was right. I had like slept on and solved some things in my sleep, I think, some problems, and then I went back after it, and yeah, it was no problem. Things went and flow, and next thing I know, I'm on my bike in like no time flat, you know?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if I would have kept at it, there'd been some damage done. That bike would have been in bad shape, you know?
Absolutely.
But I've had other times
Yeah.
where, like, you know, I am fighting through it, and it's like, well, I don't have time. Like, I'm not that frustrated with it. It's just taking longer, and it's just like, you just keep pushing and get it done, you know? Like, little projects like this Airstream and stuff, you know? Like, covered a lot of mouse debris in here. And I was on hands and knees getting it all out, you know? So, like, that was just a time thing, and I knew it, so I had, like, the meditation going into it. And I knew it was going to take me all day and then some, and it did. But now we're in here using it, so
Right.
yeah, it was worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess, I don't want to keep you too late, but did you have anything you want to cover before I ask you another question? Oh, I didn't know if yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know if I left you hanging on the clock or anything. I guess I had a couple of questions, because like in the clock with the wolf, I didn't notice it until you said something, because like I was just looking at the whole picture of it, and then when you zoom in and you see like the two wolves, and when you talked about the one wolf looking at the other one, and it looks like it's kind of like a fire scene behind it, right? When you explained that to me, that was like, I don't know, that seemed like to resonate. It was like really powerful to me. I guess, could you explain that a little bit, I guess?
Well, when I made the piece, so there's a wolf carved, a life-size wolf carved on the inside of the back of the clock, and she's looking out towards the wolf that's in the front of the clock, and he's looking out like for safety. She's looking to him for the signal, and he's looking out.
Yeah.
For her the signal. So there's a relationship between the wolves, and there's wolves run in packs and have families and community, and that was also a part that I wanted to bring into the piece for is something I was speaking towards. And like, just like we were saying afterwards, like the clock has its stories, and there's all these thoughts I have about it, and a vision I have towards it, and then as it's happening, it's its own thing as well, and things come out of it that deepened it, like burning the log on the outside of it, that just take it deeper and allow it to be. But to me, what makes a piece successful in the end is if that piece has an essence that then others relate to and feel moved by, or connected to, or have a spark that means it's successful. Like, they don't necessarily need to know those stories about the piece, and it's nice and it's fine and it's fun and it's good, but they can come into it and just feel that essence with them, like as a relationship, like and respond to the piece with their own stories. And that means a lot to me in my work, and I like hearing what other people have to say. When I took the clock to this show, and I had everything hinging on it, and Cliff and I took it, and we were just fueling up with credit cards, and I was strung out this was a long time ago, and like when I was living off $200 a month, and I just charged $18,000 on one piece, One of the most meaningful moments at that show that happened to me was when a person who had seen the clock had just been so moved by it that they brought, it was a friend or a relative, to see the clock. And this woman was blind.
Oh.
She was this beautiful, elderly, small, as in smaller than me, like this kind of delicate woman who was totally blind. And this gentleman brought her back to see my clock.
Oh.
And so she asked me if it's okay to touch it. And I always think it's a compliment if my work incites people to want to touch it. I don't have a problem with that. I like that. I want that them to want that intimacy. And I'm like, of course, certainly. So I watched her with her hands, with the wolf that was on the outside of the clock. I watched her hands go along and see the wolf. So then I opened the back of the clock, and so she could step in and see the she-wolf in the back of the clock.
Yeah.
And I watched her, and she turned around with tears running down her face, just running down her face. And she reaches out her hand for my hand, and I took her hand inside my hands, and her hand was smaller than and my hands are rough, working with the
hands.
materials that I work with. And I was holding her eyes in my hands, right?
Yeah.
And she was so moved, and she just said, "Thank you."
Oh, man.
Thank you. And it was a moment when I felt so much love from her, and I felt so humbled and so thankful, right? Like, it seems crazy to do what I did and spend that kind of money to create this piece. But for her to be able to see it, she didn't need to know the stories. She didn't even need to have eyeballs.
Yeah.
That worked. She had beautiful eyes, by the way.
Oh, really?
I was looking into her eyes. I mean, they were beautiful. They were just, they couldn't see, but she was like so full of sight that she saw.
Kind of feel the warmth even.
She saw this piece, you know?
Yeah, and I can't think of I can't think of a better compliment right now. Like that has got to be just the most fulfilling, amazing thing, because you gave a gift to a person who probably did not expect that going in, who wasn't looking for it because they probably didn't even know really it existed, and to come along in your piece, and then also to have permission by you to touch it, because a lot of people don't want their pieces really handled because you know what might happen, and I understand that part too. But I mean, for that lady to be able to get in there and feel it, and whatever experience that she had with it is so powerful, so amazing, and you were able to help that, and be part of it. That's huge.
Yeah, then it was like super validating, but it was, I don't know about validating's the word, but when I look back over the years, like when I think about what I do and what matters to me, it's like moments like the very first exhibit of my carved pieces. I told you I was working with trees, because they were selling, the district where I was working on fire crew was selling firewood for $5 a cord, and I could get materials for $20, like 4 cords of wood, quite a bit of,
Yeah, it's a lot of wood.
And so I'd made these pieces and had them in the show, and in the lobby of the Plant Growth Center at the Montana State University. And then I found out that like writing teachers were bringing their classes in to be amongst the work, to write, to be inspired by it, and just to write creative stories just from the pieces. So they're living beyond. So that's the point, right? Like in the end, by just listening and pursuing what I feel called to do, and I can get caught up in the thing in my head. What I'm doing valuable? Should I be doing more important work? Should I be, that kind of thing, especially nowadays, like we're limited on resources and everything. But then when I think about these moments and I look back at like people being touched and moved, people, when I had pieces out at the show that you referenced in the bio, where people would come and bring other people, like the janitor from the lobby, from the Plant Growth Center, brought his family, like, so I like it, the fact that the pieces cross different types. They're not necessarily in a museum where just maybe certain people go to museums. I like the idea of public art. I have nothing against museums, and I love having my pieces in museums, but I love having them in places and like as furniture where people touch, like the piece you're talking about at the airport, where, the people are invited to actually interact with the piece, because I made the bison also be a bench. I didn't make a bench and carve a bison on it. Like I made the bison a bench, and so, that stuff, it's important. That's why, then I'm just thankful.
Yeah, it's Yeah, yeah, like you said, it's kind of hard to put in words because it is, it's really super rewarding, right? Like, because you're doing these high-end pieces that you're able to make a living off of, and then you're also able to share the emotion and everything that you put into it and the time with someone else, especially like me, who is, I really enjoy art because I am so bad at it. Like, I had art class in high school. I took, different arts at gen eds in college, and just messed around a little bit. And my brother has a little bit of artistic talent, and my grandpa was pretty artistic and did a little bit of carving and some other stuff and that was, artistic. And I'm trying to remember all the stuff he did, but he did some like wood carving stuff. And it's just totally like just didn't get to me, like, and this is fine, but it makes me appreciate it more, because it's like this, it would be absolutely impossible for me to do. I could be right next to you and you could be coaching me through it, and it would not look like it wouldn't look like a rabbit, and it wouldn't look like, a moon or, anything close to it, Is that a moon? Would you say moon?
Yeah, it could be a moon. I think of it as a moon.
That's what I was thinking too. That's where it went with me. But I guess, I want to like say what it is, because it could, like you said, it could be different from somebody else. And then like on the part, we talked about earlier about kind of sharing your art. The owl that I bought for my wife from you that you did, little sculpted bronze owl, how, and it fits in your palm. So like how it warmed our house, like just having the tiniest little piece coming to our house, and like how amazing it was, and just like when you put it in your hand and how lifelike it is, and it feels warm itself, even though it's a cold piece of bronze. But on that line, when Raymond was talking about the other person who got the same owl, who uses it at their clinic, and people come in, they hold it all day, and it gets warm. And then when she leaves at the end of the day, it's still warm when she puts it back. Like, that is so cool to me, that people like get some peace in that piece, and then, like we were talking today, like the idea of just like, since my wife's pregnant, and then like, just like anxiety, the day-to-day hormone stuff going on, it's like, yeah, I'm going to tell her to start maybe carrying it around with her, just to have it, and grab it if she needs it, So that's the intangible things that art is, and I think sometimes people get away from it because they're just like, just like proud of having this piece on my wall, but I don't know if they sometimes really relate to it, I guess. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe they see it and they're just like, they brings them somewhere. Yeah. I get emotion from it, I guess.
And I think it's okay, like, sometimes pieces come into our life and they're meaningful for a while, and then it's okay to move them on too. Like with anything, like then pass it on. Like it's some pieces you don't ever want to give up, maybe, but you don't know. I don't think I know. Like I do know that I haven't committed to a tattoo because I'm not so sure that I want it forever, because I am switchy. Like in my work, I work in a lot of different mediums, and I just get pulled in different directions, and I could just, if I had just kept making carved horse beds or whatever, that I probably, would be a grand living or whatever. But I didn't make a horse bed. I made a bed about the West. Yeah. And I didn't want to just make horse beds for me. And so sometimes, like, business-wise, maybe, it's good to be to just stick with one thing. But just being true to who I am and how I work, I follow that, where the passion takes me, where the invitation lies, that intrigues me, and it's like, come, let's play with me. Yeah. Come climb me on this mountain. There's certain mountains you look at and they're just like, they're beckoning. They're like, come. Yeah. And it's hard to ignore that,
Yeah, I never even thought about it in that sense too. Because like, what I was thinking about was like, this podcast was kind of like knocking, and it kept knocking, and it kept knocking, and I was like, I need to do this, but I was nervous, to me, I'm just like some knuckle dragging firefighter, right? Like, I used to throw my body out of a plane at the earth to put fire out. Like, I mean, doesn't take a lot of brain power, like, so I'm like, I don't know if this is for me, if I'm just going to sound like, some, dummy on a mic. So I was like, but I knew I wanted to do it. I don't know why. I just like, it kept bugging me. So like, finally I did it. And it reminded me of the story you told earlier about the raven, And I was like, wow, like I didn't say it at the time because we were getting on other stuff, but I was like, man, I definitely had that before, And I don't know if I didn't do this. I don't know. It'd probably be bugging me. I won't be able to sleep.
Yeah, that's good though, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I honor you for stepping in and facing those fears because they're real.
Yeah.
They're real. Like, who am I to go think I can carve wood or whatever? Like, who am I? Like, those fears, they're real, they're legit, but listening to that voice and being willing to bumble and whatever your way through. Like, sometimes there's some freedom in beginning something too, because you're like, I don't have to, I obviously am not good at this. I've never done it before.
Yeah,
so you can just like jump in, but there's this thing, about courage, when the Oprah Network, that show was called Fearless Women, that they came and wanted to do they wanted to do an episode about me on this show called Fearless Women.
Oh, really?
And when the crew showed up there on the mountain, I said, well, maybe it was even before then. I said, I'm not sure why you want me on the show. I'm not fearless. Like, I scare myself all the time. I said, I just do it anyway. Maybe you should call the show Gals with Gumption.
Oh.
Because it's like, it's not about being fearless. It's about feeling the fear, admitting it, and doing it anyway. And what that doing it anyway could be because you have this urge, you have this passion, you have this feeling you're not going to be able to sleep if you don't do it. And you might fail, and who are you to do it? You said you're a knuckle drag. I mean, that's like not giving yourself enough credit for who you are. Also, it does take a lot more than, it does take brain power to jump out of a plane.
It does, yeah.
Land and not. And there's so many factors.
Yeah, to be able to make it down.
Yeah, a bag of tree instead of getting between them so your chute doesn't, all of this stuff. Like, there's a lot, and there's different kinds of brain power, and there's a lot of like common sense and tapping in that being a smoke jumper requires. And I think we all have our own unique purposes and our own unique callings, and if we can allow ourselves to be brave enough to pursue them.
Yeah.
Despite all the voices, because we have those in spades, right? And we have those in crowds, and the voices just happen. And then if we can do that anyway, and be willing to be foolish, and be willing to be klutzy, and be willing to maybe not be good at something. The beauty on the other side. And I think that that's that. I mean, why else are we here?
Yeah, totally. Like I feel like creating is like part of it. As humans, we've been doing it forever. Whether it's a bowl to eat out of, or a vessel to keep food in, or whatever it might be, or just like cave painting. Like I saw one down by Sedona where this archaeologist, Jason Nez, I believe is the fellow's name. Great, awesome guy. Took his time out of his day to take us firefighters into the spot where a lot of people have never been, to show us these cool pictographs and explain what he thought they were. He's like, it was kind of like your artwork though. He's like, we don't know, but this is what I believe it is. It's just from all the other ones, and we just see these symbols and we see them recurring and they're significant. And from what we can tell from this one, it looks like a hunting scene. You can see like the people dressed up like animals, and the other like people trying to herd the animals somewhere. And then you look at like archers here, waiting for the animals to come into this like enclosed canyon. So that's what we kind of think it's like depicting a hunt. And it's like, man, this is cool, you know?
I love that he admitted that he's not sure.
Yeah.
Because there's so much history that says this means this and this means that. And that I feel like that's so, and I mean, like another person could look at the same scene and see these are people dressed like animals, but maybe these are people embodying their animal spirits or their spirit animals, that kind of thing. Like we don't know, or maybe there's shamans that have had this vision that, like there's so many things that it could be. And I remember, in college in one class something, and I was reading a archaeological kind of like book explaining this image on some like Mesoamerican pottery or something, and they were saying, this is a warrior, whatever. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, that warrior has breasts, like, and they weren't even seeing them. Like, I wasn't making them up, and it's like, so that could be a warrioress or a priestess or, and they were like, this is this and this. And I'm like, well, maybe like there's so I think admitting that we don't really know. And I think right along those lines, like, like the equivalent would be graffiti spray painted underneath an overpass.
Yeah.
And say however many hundreds of years from now, thousands of years from now, the graffiti, because of the kind of stuff we make paint out of, is still there.
Yeah.
And the overpass is still there, and the rest of, because we've demolished the rest of our civilization. So people see this, they're digging this stuff up, and they're like, oh, look, this is a crossroads. So this is a holy place, and they built this arch so they could then have ceremony below the arch, and fuck you is the name of their god. That kind of thing. Like, we don't know.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. That's a good way to put it.
Right?
Yeah,
like, I do. Like, we have to have some respect for that. So I just love that part of your story. Like, I know that wasn't your point, but I just think that's an interesting thing.
No.
And to be open to, and I think part of what draws us to these things is that they are the marks of human there, and we have this connection.
Yeah.
To them in the past and to each other now and in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, history's so important, and all that. Like, that's a good take though. Like like if it's, fuck you was here, like,
we see it all the time in this culture. That was a very important being.
Yeah.
Right? Or whatever the other ones would be.
Yeah, whatever the interpretation they have, and I think sometimes I would take things like too serious, in the black and white of history when it, might not be, and we don't know because we weren't there,
Yeah.
I heard like recently they were finding out there was more warrior Viking women than they not long ago they thought that wasn't a thing. It was all male, but now they're finding there was warrior women in the Viking world. Mm-hmm. So it's like, you don't know, like they were so sure of that for however long, and now like they're finding out that there were some female warriors, and here's proof. So yeah, man, I think.
We probably have rambled. And
I was gonna say, I think about wrapping it up. I know I got a ton though, like that we're kind of leaving out, but I think it would probably be if you'd be game for part 2, because just like the Bhutan stuff and more of your outdoor adventure stuff, the summits and even like some of the like sweat lodge stuff if you want to get into that, and what else am I leaving out? I know I'm leaving a pile of stuff out here because I like the Bhutan story, because just a little teaser, I guess, for the next one. If your game is that the threes that we're talking about, 3 is kind of showing up in your life, and how there was 3 times where you invited Bhutan, and like the time frame in between, and just like I think it's just kind of interesting to see how that played out, and how just how things work out. They seem to like work out like with positive attitude and working and maybe just being a good person and pursuing whatever is most important, like, because you have more important things to do in the first invite, and then the same thing happened again, and then things just worked out and you end up over there, so I don't want to give I'm already giving too much away, but so yeah, I don't know if you'd be game for that. Maybe we'll wrap this one up and do a part 2 sometime.
Sure.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much, Amber. I appreciate it. So I guess for folks who would be interested in your artwork, you're on Instagram, Amber Jean.
Yeah, Amber Jean Art on Instagram and Facebook. I haven't been on social media a lot. My website's amberjean.com, and I'm going to be connecting with people more directly through that, like my newsletter and that kind of thing as cool. well. And I might get back into social media more. It's just sometimes life pulls me other directions, or I've been so into just being in my life. I haven't been recording to share all the moments.
Yeah.
So
no,
you
totally.
can find me out there.
Yeah. Because I just think of people like are interested in some of your pieces and like to purchase and support you and what you do, and then I mean I don't know if I can give this that way, but teasers like might have some of these available down the road. Kind of a project you're working on.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I can't wait for you to like put these up because I'm definitely gonna buy one too. So to display in the studio here. But yeah, I appreciate you coming out, taking time out of your day because I know like you and Raymond are super busy. So the tours this morning, they get to know you a little better. I mean, it's all awesome. I really appreciate it, and appreciate everyone tuning in. And I hope you enjoyed.
Yeah, it was our pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.